What's good? It's Woog. Joyce just got knocked out face first pretty much. He tried to beat the 10 count. As soon as he made it back to his feet, they waved it off. But Joyce just got stopped for the second time by Zhang. Oh my goodness. That wasn't right. The stoppage came in the third round. And the question going into this rematch was, what adjustments was Joyce about to make to prevent him from getting hit repeatedly by Zhang's devastating left hand? And we did see from the onset, and Tim Bradley called this, before the fight, like, what's he going to need to do? It was pretty textbook. He's not going to learn to move his head overnight if this wasn't a part of his skill set already. So what you can do is start moving to your left, basically moving away from Zhang's left. And we did see that from the onset of the fight. First round, Joyce is, kind of moving sort of defensively, moving towards the left, kind of popping his jab out. Very, it was interesting because I'm thinking, okay, well, how is he then going to mount some offense on top of that? Because what makes the juggernaut is the fact that he's coming in on you and he's just walking through punches to deliver his punches. He's not sweet sciencing, out techniquing anybody, which is interesting because, tell me if I'm wrong, but he was trained by Abel Sanchez for some time, and he was going from like one esteemed trainer to another early in his career. And I thought that his reputation was that he was somebody who was, yes, he was learning on the job, but yes, he did earn an Olympic silver medal. He's learning on the job, but he's like a student of the game to where he's starting to pick up these different skills, and he's closing the knowledge gap between him and those who've been doing this all their lives. I thought that was like his MO. It wasn't until, I don't know what, the Carlos Takam fight, maybe around the time of the Joe Hanks knockout, but somewhere it's almost like he made his mind up that he was going to abandon best practices, like defensive best practices, and he was just instead going to rely on his chin and walk through the power of Carlos Takam, walk through the power of, Christian Hammer, Daniel Dubois, and then eventually Joseph Parker to knock all of these guys out. By the way, the one guy who did, I believe, go the distance with him was Bryant Jennings. That's an underrated heavyweight, undersized but overachieving heavyweight Bryant Jennings, who also went the distance versus Vladimir Klitschko when Klitschko was still knocking almost all of his opponents out. But I just feel like there was like a regression in the sweet science and in the technical aspect of Joyce's game, where eventually it's like, okay, what he is what he is, and he's just gonna run with that and see how far he could take it. So the idea, I guess, is that eventually it was gonna catch up with him, either when he fought, well, it turns out it caught up with him when he fought somebody not only his own size, because Daniel Dubois was more or less his height, but Daniel Dubois isn't a southpaw, and he's not the technician that Zhang is. So this one just caught up with him in a devastating way, first in the first fight, but then in this rematch, yes, he did start off defensively, moving to his left, but again, I was wondering how he was going to mount an offensive attack on top of that, and it didn't take very long. Basically, towards the end of the first round and then into the second round, where Zhang started to rifle him with the straight left hand, started mixing the attack up high and low, threw in that deceptive right hook, and man, when he finally closed, and by the way, you saw the way that Joyce started reacting to that. He would then put his robotic stance back up, and he would start looking like the way that he was going to combat that was going to resort to his old tactics. But then you still saw like that he was still thinking, and even when he was getting hit by those combinations, which, he was getting hit hard for as long as this fight was going. Basically, once he started getting hit a lot and flush. And so it looked like he was still trying to maintain that defensive integrity that he was preparing with to go into this rematch. But it hit a point where Zhang started backing him up through the left hand to get Joyce to move in the other direction. And it looked like Zhang was thinking in there as well. But he threw the left hand to basically render Joyce naked for that sweeping and hard, pretty quick right hook. And that right hook caught all of Joyce, just sank him face first. He tried to get back up. It took him a little while. He made it back to his feet, but he was in no shape to continue, and they called the fight. Second round knockout for Zhang Zhang. And I mean, it just begs the question, where does Joe Joyce go from here? He's 37, 38. Again, it's just interesting that he made it as far as he did with that style. Like, when he stopped putting the pieces together and he stopped even trying to be defensively responsible in any way, and he just became the quote-unquote juggernaut, he took that very far. And I want everybody to consider this. Don't forget what you thought of Joe Joyce before his first stoppage loss to Zhang Zhang. Because we have this tendency to create a different paradigm, and the paradigm, as it pertains to a fighter, kind of shifts as you see him fight over fight. So there are countless fighters that we could look to from the past who had very good reputations. Okay, like Shannon Briggs. A lot of people might remember Shannon Briggs just getting pummeled by, I think it was Vitaly Klitschko. Yeah, right? Vitaly Klitschko's the one who pummeled Shannon Briggs. But don't forget what Shannon Briggs did before that, and all the times that he wowed you before he ran into that devastating loss. Don't look at this string of 2 losses for Joe Joyce and all of a sudden throw out any good idea that you had of him prior to that. Yes, this was a nightmare of a matchup for him, but he did do some amazing things before these 2 losses. And I want to carry that same idea as we evaluate different fighters' careers. Like, don't forget that in what became a disappointing career for, Victor Ortiz, arguably. I mean, he made a lot of money. He fought Floyd Mayweather. He kind of quit after trading a bunch of knockdowns with Marcos Maidana. And to me, in terms of his inner warrior, that told me a lot of what I needed to know about Victor Ortiz. But don't forget that he came back after that and beat Andre Berto. You know what I mean? So yes, our opinions of fighters will change when we see them in these very vulnerable situations where they suffer bad losses. But don't forget the good that Joe Joyce did, and don't forget the opinion and the desire of people wanting to see Joe Joyce go against Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua, some of the top tier elite heavyweights. Joe Joyce didn't have to take this fight against Zhang, and in hindsight, in retrospect, he shouldn't have. This was just the wrong one if he wanted to maintain that path to his, mandatory challenger status. He just picked the wrong opponent, and he just suffered 2 bad losses to that same opponent. But again, I just want you to remember what you thought of Joe Joyce before he ran into Zhang Zhang. Because, look, at the time that he stopped Joseph Parker, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And yes, Joseph Parker was greatly undersized, as, have a lot of Joe Joyce's opponents. Joe Hanks was undersized compared to Joe Joyce. Again, Bryant Jennings was undersized. Carlos Takam was undersized. And yes, Joseph Parker was undersized. You know what's interesting about this though? Because styles make fights and matchups matter. Hear me out real quick. I actually think that Joseph Parker would have a decent shot against Zhang Zhang. So we saw what happened when Joe Joyce fought Joseph Parker. We saw what happened when Joe Joyce fought Zhang Zhang. I just wonder what would happen if Zhang Zhang fought Joseph Parker. I just feel like Joseph Parker, fights with a pretty good pace, throws a lot of punches, he's durable, he could go a hard 12 rounds. He's got a good chin. Yes, he did get stopped by the Juggernaut, but that was just the Juggernaut clicking on all cylinders and Joseph Parker being unable to hurt Joe Joyce in the way that Zhang Zhang hurt Joe Joyce. But I just wonder if it could be that sort of a matchup cycle if we were to ever get Zhang Zhang versus Joseph Parker. But I'm assuming Zhang Zhang is going to want his shot at a title. Like, 2 stoppages over Joe Joyce. Yes, the WBC title is tied up with Tyson Fury, who's about to fight Francis Ngannou. Who knows what he's going to do with that WBC belt after that? I don't think the WBC belt is not on the line for Fury versus Ngannou. But, Mauricio Suleiman and the WBC don't appear to be in a hurry to make a mandatory opponent for Tyson Fury. I still want to see Deontay Wilder fight either Andy Ruiz or go ahead and schedule that fight against Anthony Joshua. And we'll see if Anthony Joshua takes another interim fight before they try making Deontay Wilder versus Anthony Joshua. Alexander Usyk, now that he satisfied his WBA mandatory, stopping Daniel Dubois in that pretty controversial fight, right? His next in line is going to be his IBF mandatory, which is Filip Ergovic, who did get that close decision win over Zhili Zhang, and then recently stopped Dempsey McKean in a pretty uninspiring fight. I mean, I was pretty bored with Filip Ergovic versus Dempsey McKean. He got the late stoppage, though. There's just something about Filip Ergovic's body language that's really a put off to me. The way that he walks back to the corner and stuff, it just looks like he's either not into it or that he's discouraged. I don't know what it is, but I don't like it. But I'm assuming that Zhili Zhang, because of what I just mentioned, and Filip Ergovic being Alexander Usyk's next mandatory, I just hope they're able to somehow skirt that and somehow make Usyk versus Fury, or hopefully at least if Usyk fights Filip Ergovic, then be able to pivot to a battle for undisputed. All that to say, I don't think Zhili Zhang is the very next in line for a title shot. So I just wonder who he wants to fight next, if it is not Tyson Fury or Alexander Usyk. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this. Was not a competitive fight. It was interesting that we saw Joe Joyce come in with a different plan. It just had no legs to it. I didn't see him mount much of anything resembling an attack. And again, if you go from being the juggernaut to a back foot patient style sweet science boxer, who are you at that point? Because what made him dangerous was his resilience and his endurance, his power, his size, and his just willingness to just keep on walking through whatever you had to eventually overwhelm you and to stop you. Whether he stopped you in the early to middle rounds like he did Christian Hammer, or stop you in the late rounds like he did Joseph Parker. That was his MO. And if he's not doing something like that, at least putting that type of offensive pressure on you, I don't really know what the threat is in Joe Joyce, because he's slow as molasses in terms of getting punches and combinations off. Almost sometimes jokingly slow, where sometimes I thought that he was just putting a probing paw out there, not in this fight in particular, but in general. Sometimes the way that he would just kind of throw like a half speed hook. Like, it's almost like, if you're watching a video and you try to slow it down to half speed or even a quarter speed, Joe Joyce's punches at times look like they were operating at those speeds, to where I'm thinking, he wasn't even trying to land that one, right? He was just putting a hand out there to either get the guy to move a certain way. I don't know. I just feel like, I guess there was a part of me that thought that the juggernaut, that slow, plodding, but resilient juggernaut style of Joe Joyce was a choice, and that he had more of a bag of skills to dive into if he needed to extract those skills and bring those skills out. I thought that he could tap into skills that he just wasn't displaying fight over fight because he didn't need to. I didn't know that this is all he had, and it was pretty much this or bust for Joe Joyce, but I guess it was. And I guess I was giving his, Olympic pedigree and his, I was trained by Abel Sanchez for some time, and this guy, but I thought I must have been giving that too much credence. Not that I picked him in the rematch, but I did think that he was going to go the 12-round distance and lose a decision to Zhili Zhang. But yeah, I didn't know that he was this much of a one-style, one-trick pony, and that it was really this reliant on taking a bunch of punches to get anything off. I thought that if he needed to show more defense while maintaining some offense, that he could do that. But I guess he couldn't, or at least not against Zhili Zhang. But yeah, let me know what you thought about this fight. Zhili Zhang is an interesting one. He's 6'6", he's about 270 something, close to 280, and he's a two-fisted fighter. He's got a missile of a left hand, and we just saw his right hand, which it was also his right hand that knocked Filip Ergovic down in their early rounds. So, I mean, I don't need to tell you, keep your eye on Zhili Zhang. Like, I would love to see him fight any one of the top heavyweights. I mean, I would love to see him fight even those mid-tiers or former top-tierish heavyweights like Dillian White, Joseph Parker, like if a older Alexander Povetkin was still around, somebody like that. Or of course, I would love to see him fight Tyson Fury or Alexander Usyk or Deontay Wilder. I mean, I would be intrigued by Zhang, who, you know, has got some laser punches. I do worry about his stamina, but man, when he's letting that offense go, he knows what to throw and where to throw it, how to throw it, when to throw it. He's a thinking guy in there, and he's massive. I mean, look at that guy's like hands and head. That's just a big, big dude. And I would like to see him fight, Andy Ruiz, Anthony Joshua, any one of these guys. But yeah, let me know who you think Zhang would have success against out of these top 10 or even top 15 heavyweights. Who do you think he would beat, and which heavyweights do you think would give him issues or beat him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.